Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
And this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com.
Will AI be able to handle your cold email replies? In this episode, you'll hear Jack and I discussing the future of cold email reply handling and how AI will impact the role of the modern salesperson. You'll hear arguments from two camps, ranging from tried and true sales processes and the opportunities opened by AI, so you can make your own informed decision as to what you want to believe. We'll share our take on AI already available, such as Booking.ai, trade-off between teaching AI and benefiting from AI.
First, let's get pretty clear what we're talking about here, because AI sales is a bit of a kind of a buzzy term here. So, Jeremy, just explain what it means when we say using AI for follow-ups or to manage follow-ups.
I think the idea came from you, Jack, sending me a link originally about Watson Tone Analyzer, which is something that IBM developed. And basically what you do is you paste text in a box on their website and it tell you, that line meant they were sad, that line meant they were hungry. And basically just going through sort of like the human emotion spectrum. And the idea here is to sort of use that as information to automatically reply with a predefined template to some of the reply you're going to get from your cold email.
That's absolutely right. And when I came across this technology, I basically thought that this was the first step that I've seen a computer being able to say, okay, Jack, here's the responses that you got today. I've already taken a look at each one, and based on the algorithms and my artificial intelligence, courtesy of the folks at IBM, here's what each message is not only about, but here's how the writer was feeling when they sent you this reply. So it has a pretty good idea if this reply is happy, upset at you, curious to learn more, these kinds of things.
All right. So basically, if you think this is total BS, I'm going to be your challenger. And if you think the technology is going to change your life and going to be a game changer, then you want to hear Jack's argument. So, Jack, you start.
Okay, so let's start with a George Lucas sounding scenario here. Sometime not so far in the future, you start a cold email sequence on a list of prospects. As replies come in, they get analyzed. Custom follow-ups are created based on the text written in that reply. And not only that, but they're added to the right kind of follow-up sequence within seconds. So it's instead of an email conversation, it's more like live chat with an intelligent salesperson who's quick to deliver the most relevant responses back to the inbox within seconds. So it's like if Siri or Alexa was good at sales and was monitoring your inbox all the time.
I think we would know it by now if Siri or Alexa were good enough for selling stuff, but maybe they are.
So in this scenario though, right, like we're not there yet. We're not, but we're getting there. The tools are coming out. We mentioned IBM Watson's tone analyzer, which is very much in this kind of realm of AI that can process emails and handle replies. Another product comes to mind, X.AI, which is a personal assistant that's run on artificial intelligence that schedules conversations. They'll be able to add people to your calendar sort of by just saying, hey, I'm free Tuesday at 3, does that work? And it'll automatically figure out if it does.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Have you tried this?
Looked into it enough, but to be honest, I think Calendly is getting this job done today. But again, we're moving this direction.
This is interesting. So basically, there is this ability, but you're not even using it. You're using your Calendly instead.
Just for this particular example, X.AI becomes interesting once the other person has agreed to take a meeting with you, for example. At that point, you might as well send them a Calendly link. But if X.AI could work the conversation to the point where they said, okay, yep, a phone call makes sense, when's a good time, then that's something completely different. Then that is artificial intelligence powering your follow-ups.
I think that kind of works with X.AI. That may actually work for booking appointments because you kind of expect like, hey, I'm giving that to my VA. he's kind of dumb or she's kind of dumb. So she will have like really basic language capabilities and, I can just say a few things. I think for a sales conversation, that may actually be quite tough yet. Maybe in 50 years, who knows? But right now, no chance.
I'm hearing this in 2018 where we have self-driving cars. You can order an Uber in a few cities that'll pick you up without a driver.
Is it the one that actually run over grannies?
So let's sort of like zoom out because all of us can imagine flying cars and robots that sell stuff for us. But let's talk more about what's going on today because even that is pretty exciting in my opinion. It sounds, Jeremy, like the biggest drawback is, Jack, won't these people know that artificial intelligence is replying to their conversation on your behalf?
It's a great question, but I think there is way more than that. Like, for example, an AI could be really good if it's trained into a certain process. In reality, I think the volume of the reply we're getting is just not there yet. So you will have to have some kind of pre-training of the AI potentially at that stage. If you can manage to replicate like close as possible to a human brain, I think the problem you're going to meet is that you may actually miss the chance to pivot and you may come too early saying like, oh, my sequence actually doesn't work, and you will actually miss some of the element that people will sprinkle on in their replies. And unless you're actually reading it yourself, I don't think any AI will be able to tell you, hey, maybe you should propose that instead. So it may work in a predefined process where, hey, you're selling salt online. Here we go. Something that is like a very basic understanding of everyone, and there is very little room to innovate or to change.
That may be true, but just think for a moment. Follow-up AI is probably the last step in sales automation that you would tackle. This comes after your sequence has been fine-tuned so that, yes, you do know that there's a market for what you're selling. You know that this is the right way to present this product or service. You know who to present it to. And after several hundred conversations that you've had, you could probably load in the most common, let's say 80% of typical follow-ups and train some artificial intelligence to handle them. Okay, and then maybe you have a, let's call it like, if you do not know how to handle a response, then yes, kick it over to a human. You can reach me here. Those kind of exceptions to this algorithm in probably selling will be useful. But just think, if you've been selling QuickMail, for example, for however many years, you pretty much know the questions you get, the objections, these kinds of things that maybe you could download into some kind of a follow-up AI to help you with this process.
I don't think so. I don't think anything like set in stone. And if the market is starting to shift, you still would like to know that before, realizing that suddenly your sales is dropping like too fast.
Oh, but Jeremy, remember with this, even with IBM's Watson's tone analyzer, this AI could probably tell you on a weekly basis, hey, the market is responding well this week. In fact, 84% of the messages were extremely satisfied and curious to learn more, and only 12% were upset at this, sequence. So it could give you just checkpoints all along your journey. And if it comes across a bad week, for example, it'll probably give you way more information than we have today to figure out how to pivot, if you will.
Well, information is nice when it's actually actionable, right? We all know, stories of people just looking at graph in awe and say, oh, this is amazing, all those data I have. But actually, most of the time, you just need one metric or two.
Perfect. So then that metric is just, hey, this week performed worse than last week. Take a look at some of these responses to make sure we're on track. And then it's a weekly check-in. It's a tool, right? Maybe one day it will be more natural to buy from a robot who doesn't have these any alternative motives. Maybe buying from a robot will be better. I mean, we sort of already do with online shopping, but my point is, for right now, they can assist you. And I think they're going to be able to interpret your replies in cold email to help you follow up better. Speaking of that, I know we've talked briefly about crafting certain follow-up messages based on certain replies. Don't you think that artificial intelligence could help determine which prospect should see which kind of follow-up sequence?
Well, that's a trick question.
Because the answer is yes.
I don't think it's that clear, honestly. Of course, it's possible, but we are going to come down to the same thing. At some point, the AI needs to be trained. The volume needs to be good enough for that. If every week you kind of like have to check again and then see, to just double check what the AI already processed, you're not really winning that much time at this stage. Whereas if you just quickly check it and then just press a button, that a human actually at the moment at least has way more chances of picking up things that the AI will not be picking up. And there is a sort of like creativeness of replies as well. Now, one thing the AI is good for, and I'm giving you ammunition here, is the consistency, right? So you'll know that always the same approach actually leads to always the same results. But at some point, you will lack the ability to really innovate, on the spur of the moment when you have like that stroke of creativity or something like that. I will suddenly say, hey, how about if I reply that way? Or then suddenly you'd seen someone in his signature saying like, cheers from Orlando. And you say, oh, no way, I've been in Orlando too. And then you sort of like build this relationship. So those things are hard to sort of like fake or actually processed at a high quantity. Sure, that may come in the future, but right now, I think the time to set those things will need to be offsetted with the gain. And that can only happen in volume. And it's easier when the offering is like very already fixed. Like if you're a sales rep, then sure, I'd love to use AI to actually assist me, because basically as a sales rep, your scope is very defined and limited. You can't really go off track too often. But as a founder, for example, trying to start a new product or being always listening to the market and then willing to have conversation with other people and then bounce on things, that's going to be incredibly hard to emulate from an AI standpoint unless you can replicate with a brain understanding.
And we're talking about things that I agree are months or years out, but a couple things that we can do
Decades,
with
century.
Decades. No. I mean, Elon Musk is working on putting an iPhone in our brains. So I think we're getting pretty close with this kind of stuff. But anyways, something that we can do today with not necessarily artificial intelligence, but with computers and replies. It's basically like, just imagine you've got a QuickMail campaign setting up and you say, okay, Zapier, anytime a reply comes in, I want you to send that message to Mail Parser. Mail Parser, I want you to look at the response in there. If that message contains go to hell, for example, I want you to archive that in my negative folder so that it doesn't wear me down when I'm checking responses in cold email. So sure, there could be exceptions to this where maybe a good reply use that phrase, but today, this kind of computer filtering could be used to help out anyone who's sending a cold email campaign. Getting rid of harsh responses is just one way. Another could be highlighting replies that mention pricing, so maybe you should get a text message or a Slack notification anytime you get a very warm reply. So if someone mentions pricing, they should pop up on your radar immediately so you can handle them appropriately, or maybe even follow up with a phone call. But this is the beginning. This is, hey, let me sort through your inbox for you while you go about your day. And if something is not worth your time, I'll filter it. If something is dramatically important, you're going to see it immediately. This is like step one in computers helping us with sales.
Yeah, so you're basically talking about assisting more than actually taking decisions.
Today, 100%, it is assisting. It's not quite there. But I don't think this is too far out in the future where it's like every sales rep is going to have AI assistants, where it's like, hey, I'm glad you're interested. I'm going to pass you off right now to my assistant. She's artificial intelligence. She's way faster at me on getting you relevant information. You can ask questions. You can even book a demo. Everything you need to do will be done faster this way. Maybe, just like some people prefer having food delivered instead of going out. Maybe this would be a preferable way to interact with a brand. Like, it's from a technology perspective, it's not science fiction. It could be there relatively soon.
Yeah, I guess I see that more as, have you called your bank for support lately? Press those button, and then you come to people that, have to go through a certain series of steps. They can't actually go off script.
Right.
And you just end up having like a terrible experience. Even a robot will not be any better in that sense. But I think you're right for probably 80% of the cases where, people insult you or people are saying like, yes, here is my credit card number kind of thing. we're probably just talking about like maybe a different ratio, and we're probably not really agreeing on a ratio, whether we are on the positive side or on the negative side, like optimist versus pessimist kind of thing. Would you say it's fair?
I know that this is going to play a role. It already is in some shape or form. I mean, even using QuickMail is some way of using a computer to automate these conversations in a way. This is like layer 2 on top of that, where it's like, okay, which replies deserve more of your attention? And the only thing we're missing, and I think both you and I will agree on this, is how to reply personally when somebody asks a specific question. I don't think that artificial intelligence can take a specific sales question, such as, does this work for my industry, and return a coherent answer that's going to be better than what you and I could write up for our service or our product.
Well, in the 80s, everyone thought that they'll have a hoverboard, flying cars, and it was like so clear it's going to happen. And yet, here we are 40 years later, and it still hasn't happened. So I'd take my bet and think in 50 years, we still won't have robots, selling to us that way.
50 years. So, I mean, okay, so let me bring us down back to earth, because it's very possible that even today, right now, you and I could create, let's say, a 2 or 3 part cold email campaign. Sequence 1 goes about getting them to say, yes, I'm interested to find out more. And if they happen to just reply yes, then maybe they automatically get added to sequence 2, where it says, hey, so glad you asked for more info. Here it is. If this makes sense to schedule a chat, click on my Calendly link or use x.ai to schedule it. And then hypothetically, that is Zapier, Mail Parser, QuickMail moving along a sales conversation, so that basically the call gets booked thanks to not humans, but programs.
Yeah, so I agree with that. And I think the key here is to figure out how to build a CTA so that it's clear direction for people and like super easy and super small, like, reply yes to that. But then we'll come in conditional parsing. We don't come into artificial intelligence. And I think that's probably where definition is probably something that we could argue on here, where I think that, those ifs and else type of statements with using Zapier and some mail parser and things like that are more down to conditional parsing than actual, artificial intelligence. So processes in place, yes, we can put a lot of them, and I think we can do a lot of them with that already without having to rely on true artificial intelligence.
So I think the only thing artificial intelligence needs to really step in and take care of now is what happens when somebody replies with one of these questions. It's not a simple 3-character response that indicates they're interested. What if it's, hey, this sounds kind of exciting. I heard about you guys from XYZ, but how does my industry typically respond? Something like this. Can artificial intelligence tell the difference between that kind of reply? And if anything, at the very least, I would like to say that IBM Watson's tone analyzer could say, hey, Jack, let me bubble this message to the top of your inbox because it sounded very positive based on our data, and they did not reply with some boilerplate yes or no. You need to take a look at this because they mentioned the word interested and a question mark at the end of their sentence.
Yeah, I guess you could get rid of a lot of bulk answers that way.
And maybe this speeds up how quickly you can reply to leads. And you may find out that the faster you reply, the better conversion rates you have throughout your funnel. And I'd imagine every salesperson would agree with this. But I mean, this is the direction we're heading. Will there be artificial intelligence that can handle every kind of reply? Like you said, it's how are you going to train that program for your business? And here's what I'm thinking, Jeremy. It's like, if you can say, here's our FAQ on these kinds of outbound campaigns. They either ask about pricing, they ask about industry questions, or they ask about our feature X. Now, here are how you're going to reply to those particular questions. It's up to you now to filter them and add them to the right response and follow-up campaign based on what they say. This, I think, is very possible and will happen within the next 2 years. They'll be able to pull out words in a string in the response that indicates what they're asking. And if it's within those FAQ questions, they will have answers written up and they will add them to a follow-up campaign.
So I guess it means that if you have a very small number of leads or replies, you probably want to parse them yourself because you're not going to win that much time. And the risk of the AI to make a mistake is greater than actually the time it will take to read every answer.
Let's just sort of take one step to the left for a second and just think if Gmail, for example, gave this particular artificial intelligence access to all of its data and says, here's every single Gmail conversation that we've ever seen. I want you to analyze the conversations, find out what people are replying to most. I want you to make sense of this in a way that this artificial intelligence can say, okay, if a reply looks like this, based on all of Gmail's data, we know that this kind of reply should do the best job of getting a response back. I think there's something here.
Maybe, because at the end of the day, what you're going to get is like an average of everything. And in certain cases, the type of answer is going to be different based on the person itself, and you can't really take all the data, aggregate them.
But Jeremy, just one layer on top of that is if this artificial intelligence had information about your prospect and said, oh yeah,
then we are good. Then we understand.
And that's not terribly out of reach either. I mean, if they can analyze an email address and say, okay, they work at this company, they're this seniority, this is when they got hired. I mean, this data will be available some way, shape, or form. Maybe then they can start making conclusions of what a marketing director at a Fortune 500 typically responds to. And now maybe we're talking about something a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, and they need to know also their Brigg-Myers type and psychology test and if they got children and stuff like that. Maybe, maybe not. Depends what level of sales.
But I think you're right. And if, I don't know, if iPhone is selling its facial recognition data to someone, but it's to me, it's not so much of a stretch to say that this kind of information, the personality of the people behind an email address could potentially be available to this artificial intelligence. And now we have officially entered science fiction world. I hope it doesn't happen because I'm not sure the implications of it, but we're heading this direction. Be ready.
I love it. One more thing I will throw out there is that everyone thinks everyone speaks English. So at some point, the AI would probably also need to adapt to different languages, and that will open a whole new level of problems and maybe some language was actually lag behind. So if you want to talk to a real human being, maybe you have to speak Japanese or something.
No, this is good. So, I mean, AI that can speak many different languages, like Google Translate, sort of, that I think is going to happen. But you bring up a great point. So not just language, but what about the kind of language that an individual speaks? So, for example, what if they could crawl through every tweet they've ever sent and get kind of a bit of a cadence for this is how this person talks. These are the topics that they're interested in. And now this artificial intelligence is able to say, oh, they've mentioned craft beer 3 times this month. So the PS is definitely going to mention highest rated craft brewery on Yelp in their city.
I love it.
In the PS, you know.
Kind of creepy. Do you remember how people responded when you had a creepy sequence?
Oh, very much. Oh, yeah. No, you don't want to get too detailed, but there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. If anything, I'm just wondering, what could they be using all of our tweet history to fuel these follow-up conversations? It can happen. And if you wanted to try it just manually, right? Like as you're responding, if you happen to find a commonality that was mentioned in a tweet from someone that you're chatting with, it does help to say, hey, I saw that you were talking about mountain biking last weekend. This is my favorite park in the States, whatever. Cheers.
Oh, sure. If someone actually has a PS and say, oh, by the way, are you still motorbiking? I've seen a few of your tweets in the past talking about that, and I own a Gladius 650 or something like that. I'll be like, that's cool. This person's doing his research, so maybe I'll be fooled and answer like a freaking bot.
That is true. That is way different than a bot saying, I see you like motocross. Buy this motocross bike.
It was a coupon
with a link to an Amazon thing with affiliate credit. All right. Well, we'll see what the future dishes out, but I like the conversation.
It's okay. I probably won't be there to see it happening. So, and if I am, I'll take early retirement, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I got on robots taking over the world and sales follow-up.
That's right. See you next week.
See you next week. So we're still years or maybe months away from robots that can follow up on our cold email replies. But even today, you may be able to highlight or hide certain messages using tools like Zapier, Mail Parser, and Gmail based on the text in the message. This might be the first step towards using automation or artificial intelligence, if you will, to help us do a better job of following up on our cold email replies. But at the end of the day, relevant, helpful, and timely responses are always going to help you move the sales conversation forward. What role AI will play with this side of cold email will depend on the speed of technology and adoption. Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high five by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast.
So they can send awesome emails.
And make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.